In this video, we're going to have a look at some of the uses of hypnosis. I joke sometimes that hypnosis is so applicable to so many goals. I feel like I could go door to door. Hey, you need hypnosis. Let me in. Let's figure out how. It's pretty much universal. This list that I'm about to give you certainly isn't an exhaustive list of the uses of hypnosis, but these are some of the things that I've personally worked on with my clients, although again, there could be many other things we could use hypnosis for. Let's look first at the physical applications for hypnosis. Hypnosis can be used to understand and address the cause of psychosomatic illnesses, thereby relieving the client of the symptoms. We've all heard the phrase, "it's all in your head." When somebody has a psychosomatic illness, they have real pain, real symptoms. It's not like they're making that up. However, there can be a correlation between what's going on in our physical body and what's going on in our psychological or emotional or even spiritual lives. And in fact, often the type of illness that we have or the part of our body that we get our diseases or symptoms in reveals a lot of clues. I had a student who came to see me for working on her menstrual cramps, and when I was interviewing her about where this problem started, she told me it began at a period in my life where my flow of creativity was being cramped. She was talking about a time in her life, she's an artist and a musician, where she was living in a place with a bunch of other people and she couldn't practice her art. So her flow of creativity was being cramped. And this actually contributed to her menstrual cramps being more extreme. Now, the interesting thing was when she was telling me about her symptoms, she didn't even hear the language that was coming out of her mouth. I had to stop her and go, "Oh, whoa, 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 wait a minute. You just used the words period, flow, cramps, and creativity all in the same sentence. These are all having to do with your uterus." So there can be, again, correlations between our physical symptoms and what's going on for us in our external world. And so hypnosis is really good about helping to make that connection. How did this symptom come to be? What was going on in your life at the time that contributed to or caused the symptom? Now, another classic example of a psychosomatic illness would be a person who has headaches in order to avoid intimacy. Or think about this one, phantom limb pain. There's no limb there anymore, and yet the person still experiences sensations or pain or itchiness or whatever. Why? I think it's because the subconscious hasn't gotten the memo yet. If you've lived with a limb for a chunk of your life and then suddenly that limb is no longer there, because the subconscious is illogical and doesn't update, it could still be creating sensation when there's no organ in which to experience sensation. And so again, when it comes to psychosomatic illnesses, when we understand the contributing factors, where that symptom came from, we can eliminate it altogether. Hypnosis also works really well on things like IBS, Crohn's, digestive issues, or any stress-related illness or symptom. Now, we can address it in a couple of different ways, and I suggest kind of doing both of these at the same time. We can address the symptoms themselves, but we can also help the client to find ways to deal with whatever the stressors are in their lives so that they aren't creating more symptoms over time. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. We whack one of the moles and then another one pops up and we whack that one. We don't want to just be trying to eliminate symptoms. We want to be eliminating the cause of the symptoms so the symptoms go away all on their own. Allergies and sensitivities, whether they're food sensitivities, environmental sensitivities, also respond really well to hypnosis. Again, there can also often be a psychosomatic aspect to these, or at least the subconscious can be contributing to the issue in some way. We can also work on cancer, and what we do with a cancer patient is going to depend on the needs and beliefs of the client. It could be helping the client to be comfortable with treatments, ease the side effects of the treatment, help the client make whatever desired or required lifestyle changes need to be made. However, there are also many documented cases of clients being able to shrink and even eliminate tumors using visualization in hypnosis. We can also work on autoimmune disorders. Again, we're often seeking out and then addressing any contributing factors. And pre- and post-operative clients are great for hypnosis. We can help a client to prepare for surgery and recover more quickly and more thoroughly afterwards. Now, as a side note, when a client is going in for surgery, they are in a highly suggestible state for a number of reasons. Think about it. They're working with medical professionals, so lots of people that they might put in a position of authority. They might feel emotional or overwhelmed because they have to have surgery. And they are also, again, under the effect of anesthetic. So they've got kind of a triple whammy. Their subconscious is wide open to whatever's said to them during that time. Now, wouldn't it be great if doctors took advantage of that suggestible state to give people suggestions for their quick recovery and for health and for vibrancy? Ah, in my perfect world. So, if I know of somebody who's going in for surgery, I want to work with them to help kind of build up that barrier so that they're not taking in anything that could be potentially damaging from the people around them. I had a weight loss client who came to see me once because she was gaining weight and hadn't made any changes to her diet or her exercise regime, and she couldn't understand why she kept putting weight on. We had a really interesting discovery come out in hypnosis. When we were tracing back to what was responsible for her weight gain, she remembered or had she was unconscious when this had happened, but the subconscious still tracks, it still stores information. She remembered the doctor telling her or making a comment about her being as big as a whale when he was operating on her. Now, here she was in a highly suggestible state under the effect of anesthetic. The doctor, a person in a position of authority, made a negative comment about her body, and she actually started responding to that comment and putting on weight. Isn't that incredible? So again, wouldn't it be wonderful if doctors used that time and that state in a positive, supportive way for the client's health and well-being? But if the doctor's not going to do it, dang nabbit, that's what we're there for. We can also work on skin disorders, rashes, psoriasis, warts, acne, all respond to hypnosis. And again, if you do research, there's tons of research out there on the efficacy of hypnosis for these particular conditions. We can also work on things like TMJ, jaw clenching, or bruxism, grinding of the teeth. Often there are subconscious reasons why a person is doing this. So we can identify what those subconscious reasons are and address them. And we can also give suggestions for the person to be able to relax their jaw, whether they're sleeping or awake. I've had many, many clients who have had some kind of sexual trauma who have ended up with TMJ. And what's been identified when we've worked on this in hypnosis is this is them attempting to keep something from coming into their mouth, let's just say, or sometimes people who have not been able to express something in the moment, who wanted to say something but felt they needed to hold back or weren't able to express, they're still clamping it down. So I've had a lot of clients who come to work on their sexual trauma, and I don't even know they have TMJ, but as we start talking, I'll ask them, do you ever clench your jaw or grind your teeth? And they look at me like I'm a mind reader, because sure enough, that can often be a side effect for somebody who has been in a position where they weren't able to fight back or weren't able to express, or somebody who's had things forced in their mouth. You think about how the subconscious works, it makes a lot of sense. If having something forced into your mouth was threatening to you, then we're going to keep that jaw clenched shut so that can't happen again. Tinnitus also responds really well to hypnosis. So tinnitus is like unwanted sound ringing in the ear. Hypnosis has been proven to eliminate tinnitus. In fact, I've had several clients that I've worked with on this exact goal. I had a client who we identified in hypnosis, his tinnitus stemmed back to having a wife who he referred to as naggy. Again, the subconscious just wants to help you out. If you've got somebody rah, 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 at you in the background all day long, it's very convenient to have a sound in your head that muffles that out so you don't have to listen to that all day. Similarly, I had a woman who came to see me with tinnitus, and hers stemmed back to she and her husband had owned a business, and they retired and handed the business over to their son, who didn't really want to take the business on, and he wasn't managing it very well. So the staff was still continuing to contact her and ask questions and, need advice and help from her, and she just didn't want to hear it anymore, so to speak. So the tinnitus, again, was her subconscious muffling out sounds that she didn't want to pay attention to. Now, I'm not suggesting that's the only cause for these types of things. I'm just saying I've seen this a lot in my practice. But don't get so attached to, oh, that's going to be the cause that you're fishing for it. Pay attention to what's going on for your client. All people are individuals, and there could certainly be other reasons why they experience these types of symptoms. Misophonia also responds really well to hypnosis. Misophonia is when somebody is oversensitive to certain sounds, like maybe the sounds of somebody eating, or mouth noises, or that p sound when people talk, or S's. So just like tinnitus, we can make a sound less invasive or distracting, and if there's a subconscious reason for the issue, we can identify and eliminate that as well. I had a 13-year-old client recently who only was really bothered by the sounds that her mom's voice would make. And it started at a time when her mom got remarried and then started disciplining her more because the stepdad thought she needed more discipline. And my client said to me, my mom got really annoying. I hated having to listen to what she was saying. It's like she was giving me this major clue. So again, there can be correlations between what's going on for us emotionally, psychologically, and physically. Now, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia respond really well to hypnosis as well. This is when people experience unexplained pain and exhaustion, and again, there can be a subconscious cause, or we can work on it from a pain management angle. I suggest doing both. I had a client who had fibromyalgia, and we figured out what it was all about. She said to me, "Did you ever see the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Well, that's my family. We get together all the time, and the women are expected to do all of this cooking, and then the women do all of the cleaning while the men sit around yammering." And she was a big introvert and didn't really want to go to all of these family events. She'd rather be at home on her own. And so the fibromyalgia was really her subconscious helping her out so she didn't have to go to these events. Nobody could make her come if she was too sick or too pain in too much pain. And if she did go, she wouldn't have to do the cooking and cleaning. Now again, this isn't the person choosing this consciously. Nobody says, how can I get out of going to my family event? I know, maybe I'll develop a really uncomfortable, terrible illness. No, this is the subconscious in its illogical way trying to help you out with meeting some kind of need that you have. Interestingly, when my client was able to kind of set some boundaries with her family and say no to them more frequently, guess what? Her fibromyalgia went away. We can also work on burns in hypnosis. Again, there's plenty of research about using hypnosis to alleviate burns, to help burns heal more rapidly, but also to help people tolerate otherwise painful burn treatments that involve having the burnt skin removed. So again, lots of research into this area, as there is into the next one, which is high blood pressure. We can slow the heart rate in hypnosis, not just during the session, but after the session as well, long term, so we can bring down a person's blood pressure. Another area that I really like working in is birthing. We can help women to have pain and intervention-free birthings, to be able to go into a birthing experience feeling calm, feeling relaxed, feeling ready, trusting her body, able to turn the birthing experience over to her body, not having to worry about anything, just be in the moment and focused. I've really enjoyed working in birthing. It's a lot of fun to connect with people on this level. They're excited about what's happening. They're looking forward to their baby. It's a really positive area to work in. We can also work in fertility. We can improve fertility. Again, there's lots of studies on this topic if you look into it. I'm personally responsible for getting a few ladies pregnant myself. Ha ha ha. I've had clients who have had psychological reasons for not getting pregnant, who once those reasons were addressed, got pregnant. In one case, I had a client who couldn't have sex because she had an allergy to semen. She had been brought up with two parents who were pastors, and she herself taught church classes. And so she picked up a lot of negative messages about sex, that you're not supposed to do it, it's wrong, it's dirty, etc., etc. And she waited to have sex until she got married, and it turned out that her first partner, her husband, was sexually violent. He would sexually assault her, and so this is when she developed that allergy to semen. So when we worked through all the messages that she'd gotten about sex and the trauma that she had around sex and helped to remove those negative associations, not only, interestingly, did her semen allergy disappear, she got pregnant a little while afterwards. Now, of course, hypnosis can be used for pain management as well. That was one of the very first uses of hypnosis back in the day before there was any such thing as anesthetic. Hypnosis was used to alleviate the pain that people would have during surgery. It was used as the anesthetic. So we could create anesthesia for people now, but people generally aren't coming for that sort of thing. If they're coming to hypnosis prior to surgery or dental work, it's usually because of fear of the dentist or anxiety around the procedure. All right, now let's look at some of the emotional issues that we can cover with hypnosis. Now remember, the subconscious is the emotional mind. It's the part of the mind that generates all of your emotions. So anything that has an emotional component to it responds beautifully to hypnosis. So with depression, again, we help the client to identify and address the cause of the depression. And we can also help the client to sleep better or sleep less, depending on how depression has affected their sleep. We can improve their appetite. We can help them to have more motivation and more enthusiasm for life. But again, typically what I'm doing is looking for the cause and then working through that with the client. Now, anxiety disorders of all type respond to hypnosis. I do a lot of work with people with generalized anxiety, worriers, and we can be taught to challenge our thoughts and adopt a mindset of being able to handle whatever arises instead of having to constantly anticipate whatever's coming up fearfully. We can also identify the cause of an anxiety disorder. Sometimes a person has been conditioned to think that way. If you've grown up, for example, in an environment where bad things happen on a regular basis, then you can be conditioned to be on the lookout for bad things. Even if a bad thing only happened once, you don't know that it's not going to happen over and over and over. And so often people who have anxiety disorders are people who grew up in an environment where there was some chaos or an unpredictable person or somebody who felt threatening to them in some way. And because the subconscious is illogical and doesn't update, if you needed to be hyper vigilant when you were younger to deal with the environment that you were in, your subconscious doesn't know that you're not still in that environment or that isn't still a necessary coping mechanism. And so when it comes to anxiety disorders, I'm doing a lot of history taking. I want to find out what was going on for them around and leading up to the time that their anxiety began. Phobias are another area that we can work on in hypnosis, and I love working on phobias because there's always a little mystery to solve. We're born with only two fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises, but we're not born with any phobias. Phobias and fears are quite different. A fear is an understandable reaction, an appropriate reaction to a situation. A phobic reaction is way beyond what is necessary for that particular situation. So, for example, a person being afraid of a bear when they run into one hiking, that's a perfectly reasonable fear. But if you're afraid of a picture of a bear, or you're afraid that there might be a bear, even if there isn't a bear, or you're afraid of a bear on TV, or you can't go into the forest because of the possibility there could be a bear, now we're moving into the territory of phobia. So I love phobias because all phobias are learned, which means there's a point along the person's personal timeline where they learn to be afraid of that thing. So we can trace back to the origins of that fear and identify it and work through it. Phobias thereby can also be unlearned. Now, social anxiety is another area that I do a lot of work in, helping people with self-consciousness, discomfort, being in groups, worrying about how other people perceive them, worrying that they're not going to have something to say. So again, social anxiety, I'm looking for the cause. I am with pretty much everything, let's face it, and helping the client to work through whatever started those symptoms in the first place. PTSD is another area that's really interesting to work in, whether it's from an accident, war, natural disaster, an attack of some type. PTSD can be addressed with hypnosis. And again, this has been one of the more interesting areas that I've worked in. I've had some really amazing clients who have survived incredible things. And I have to say, when I work in this area, I'm always in awe of human beings, how we find ways to survive, how we find ways to keep pushing through no matter what happens to us. I had a client who became a multiple personality when he was 11, or starting at 11 years old, when he was raped by an escaped convict in an outhouse and then put down the toilet hole and left for dead. I had a client who switched into hero mode and took down 2 gunmen when his hiking trip in Peru was interrupted by terrorists. I had a client who was hit by a car inside a grocery store when the driver mistook the gas for the brake and went through the window. And I've had survivors of cults and sex trafficking and many people with sexual trauma, complex trauma, that sort of thing. So this is a fascinating and underserved area. If you're looking for an area where you can really dig in and help people in a very significant way, I'd recommend getting, really skilled in addressing PTSD. OCD is another area where I think it's underserved. I've had many clients who have suffered from OCD, ranging from a client who is a chronic hand washer, several of those, to a man who would become obsessed that he hit somebody with his car and he'd have to keep circling back around the block looking for that person to make sure that he hadn't hit them. I had another man who obsessively would go to his dentist because he was certain that he had barbed wire, snakes, and broken glass inside of his mouth, and so he kept going to his dentist because he knew that if it was there, the dentist would tell him. So he would go to his dentist almost on a weekly basis until he decided to come to me to work through this instead because he just needed the reassurance or for somebody to tell him, yes, in fact, there is barbed wire inside of your mouth. Now, complex trauma is a relatively newly recognized issue, a new term, and this is somebody who has had exposure to multiple traumatic events, typically in childhood. So a client who was neglected or abused in the home, for example. I've done quite a bit of work in this area, helping people to process their childhood trauma. Hypnosis is also really good for performance anxiety, whether that shows up in the bedroom or boardroom or somewhere else. I've worked with many musicians on their performance anxiety. I work with a whole band. I always know when they're touring because all 3 of them start to set up appointments with me. I also have a client who's a vocal coach who's a perfect, wonderful source of referrals because she can recognize with her students when somebody has some anxiety or something that's causing them to tense up and is interfering with their vocalization. So she'll often send people to me who are struggling in her trainings and her classes because of something that might be going on for them of an emotional or psychological nature. I've also helped athletes of all kinds improve their performance, swimmers, skaters, dancers, golfers, a whole rugby team, and several horseback riders. When you help one horsey person get back on the horse after they've been bucked off, word gets around. And of course, anything emotional in nature responds to hypnosis. We can help clients control their anger or manage guilt or eliminate shame. I've had many clients that I've worked with for grief or dealing with a loss of some kind, whether it was a loss through death or any kind of loss, divorce, retirement, empty nesters, people who have lost some way of being or some identity that they're familiar with. I had a client who was an amputee, became an amputee after an accident, and she was mourning the loss of her athletic ability as she had known it prior. We can also work on self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others. We can give people the opportunity to finally put to rest long-standing issues that they've had with other people or with themselves, even if the other person is not a part of their lives anymore, even if the other person is dead. So just as an aside, one of the things that I find really fascinating about hypnosis is because the subconscious is the creative mind, it responds really well to symbolism and imagery, and it accepts whatever is happening inside your mind as though it's actually taking place. And so when it comes to this issue of self-forgiveness or forgiveness of others, we can create a scenario in hypnosis where the person has an opportunity to say whatever needed to be said to the other person and to hear back whatever they needed to hear back in order to resolve something that was long-standing between them. And because the subconscious doesn't know the difference, it just accepts that as though it's actually taken place. And so in situations where the client may never have had an opportunity to resolve this with the real person in the real world because either that person wasn't available to them, was no longer alive, wasn't open to resolution, we can at least give the client the opportunity to do that for themselves without that other person having to be involved. And of course, we can work with stress, helping the client to find healthy coping mechanisms, helping to reduce the stressors in their life, looking at the kinds of thoughts that they're thinking that might be contributing to their stress, helping them with self-care, all of that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of people are familiar with using hypnosis for weight loss and smoking. You could probably have a whole practice just helping people with one or the other of those goals. We can also help a person to eliminate binge drinking and eating disorders, and addiction responds really well to hypnosis as well. I've worked with people on a variety of addictions, everything from addiction to substances like cannabis, heroin, sugar, meth, alcohol, ketamine, pain pills. I've helped people quit gambling, stop obsessive porn watching, and I've actually noticed a new addiction showing up in my practice, addiction to social media and to screen time. And I'm sure that the pandemic hasn't helped with addiction because there's probably a lot of people out there dealing with the isolation, the uncertainty, and the stress by engaging in addictive behaviors. Now, when I'm dealing with addiction, primarily, like pretty much everything else I work on, I'm looking for any underlying cause. If a person, for example, is using some kind of substance to deal with stress or to numb out because they're feeling so uncomfortable in their body, and I just take away their substance, if they're still feeling that feeling, if there's still some need on a subconscious or conscious level to numb out, they're just going to pick up another substance. And so what I want to do is address any underlying cause so that the substance is no longer necessary. If a person is able to deal with uncertainty without numbing out, then they no longer need to turn to drugs or alcohol. And so I'm really looking for, why is the person doing what they're doing? What need are they trying to meet with this behavior? And how else can we meet that need, or how can I help them to resolve that being a need in the first place? When it comes to habit control, I have worked with pickers, poppers, pullers, biters, chewers, rippers, pluckers. Whether it's a person with trichotillomania who's pulling out their eyelashes or hair, or somebody who's ripping off or biting off their nails, or somebody who's chewing the inside of their lips, hypnosis can help with all of these habitual things. Again, I'm typically looking for, what is the underlying cause. For example, I had a client who was a lip biter who realized that she would bite the inside of her lips more whenever she was in an uncomfortable conversation with her partner. She realized in hypnosis that it was a way of showing him how unimpressed she was. Almost this, I'd rather bite my own face off than have this conversation with you kind of mentality. And so again, we can work on it from the habitual angle, giving the subconscious the awareness of what's going on and getting it to intervene. But more importantly, we're also helping the person to understand why they're doing what they're doing in the first place. So it looks so far as though habits are typically about getting rid of some bad habit, but hypnosis can also be used to help a person develop a healthy habit, such as exercising more or meditating. I had a client who came to me because he wanted to floss more frequently, and that was the habit we were working on. And so whether it's elimination of an unhealthy habit or developing a healthier habit, hypnosis can be used for either. There are many ways that we can help a client improve their sex life. We can work on performance anxiety or help people physically in terms of being able to have or maintain an erection or have an orgasm. And we can help people work through their sexual trauma, as well as eliminate any unwanted fetishes, kinks, that sort of thing. I had a client who had to do therapy because he had an upskirt fetish and he got caught at work using his phone to take videos of a female colleague going up the stairs. The cause of his fetish, when we got down to it and looked for that in hypnosis, was actually really sweet and kind of innocent. When he was a little boy, his mom used to have the Mary Kay lady over, and she would invite all her friends, and they'd get their hair, or not their hair, their makeup done and buy product. And when they would come over, they would all cuddle him and hug him and tell him how adorable he was, and then Mom would put him under the table with a few of his toys and a snack to hang out while they did their thing. And he had associated this feeling of being loved and this affection he got from all of these women with the view that he happened to have from under the table. So when he came to see me, it was because he was being made to come see me. But when we realized what the association was that he had made, he was able to resolve it and no longer have that fetish. He was able to find ways to meet his needs for affection and attention in ways that weren't going to cause him problems at work. Now, a lot of people aren't coming in to work on their kinks and fetishes because they generally like them, but every now and then I get a client who recognizes, or somebody has pointed out to them, that this is interfering with their normal functioning or their work or some aspect of their lives, maybe their relationship, and so they're coming in to try to resolve it so that they can function better in those areas. There are also many more esoteric applications for hypnosis. For example, you could make a whole practice around taking people into their past lives or having them look at life between lives. I don't promote myself as a past life therapist, but I've had a lot of clients sort of spontaneously regress to what appeared to be a past life when we were looking for the cause of some particular symptom. You could help clients balance their chakras, connect to their guides, channel, and even release entities. Funny story. I used to show my students video number 1 of a 2-video set, VHS, way back in the day. I'm aging myself. And the video was of a woman named Irene Hickman, a hypnotherapist, who was doing all these hypnosis sessions. I liked her approach, and so I would show it to my students as an example of one way to do hypnosis. Oh, in this one class, partway through watching that video, the video broke. The tape tore. Remember the days when videos were made out of tape? So I put in video number 2. And the video was her right in the middle of a session where she was doing a depossession on somebody, removing an entity from them. Afterwards, myself and all of my students were kind of stunned, and one of my students looked at me and said, "Are we going to learn that?" with all this excitement in her voice. So I sought out the instructor, the woman in the video. I took a course, I learned the process, and I've even used it on a few occasions. Now, when it comes to past lives or entities, I don't care if it's real or not. If working on these things helps the client to get the results that they want, that's all that I care about. Remember, we're working with the creative mind when we're working in hypnosis. I have yet to have had a client who could prove that the life that they went to was a real life. I'm not having my clients go to the archives and look up the information. What I'm looking for is when we address this, whatever it is, past lives, an entity release, what have you, do they get the results that they want when it comes to their goal? For all I know, it might be a real past life, or it might actually be a symbol that the subconscious is using to communicate what's going on for the client. Am I really depossessing the client of an entity, or is that a symbol for something else that's taking place? Again, my way of looking at it is it doesn't matter. If the client gets some kind of results from it, that's all I care about. So far it may look as though hypnosis is used for people who have problems or a specific type of crises or challenge that they want to work through. But hypnosis can also be for people who are doing really well, who just want to do better in some aspect of their life. It can be used for personal growth. So for example, study skills, memory retention, doing well on exams. For several years, I had referrals from our local acupuncture college. I would be working with their students in a group setting to help them to prepare for their acupuncture exams. I've also helped people with driving tests, swimming tests, skating tests, tests to become a realtor, tests to become an insurance agent. So there's a lot of work that you can do in the area of study skills and memory retention. Life direction. If people are struggling with existential issues, direction, making decisions, hypnosis can help them get more clarity around their answers. When we can connect somebody to their body, to their heart, to their higher self, they can find solutions better than when they're relying on making a decision using the conscious mind alone. Just because a decision looks good for us on paper doesn't necessarily mean it's the right decision for us. Hypnosis can also help people with things like self-worth, self-esteem, self-acceptance, all of the selves. And we can help switch a person from a poverty mindset to an abundance mindset so that they can manifest more easily or use the law of attraction more easily. We can help to improve a person's self-talk, what they're saying or thinking to themselves. We can help them to adopt self-care routines and habits. I don't do work with couples at the same time, but I do work with individuals to improve their relationships by working on things like boundaries and communication, that sort of thing. We can also help to change old patterns of things like people-pleasing, perfectionism, or procrastination. And again, look at any underlying causes for those things. I had a client who was writing her thesis and had a writer's block, and she realized in hypnosis that it was because she and her husband had agreed on separating when she was done doing her research. And on a subconscious level, she was trying to avoid that happening. So the writer's block was all about not completing and then having to move on to this next phase of her life. Another client came to me when she sat down to work on her memoirs at her computer and could not remember how to turn her computer on. She realized that there was something fishy going on that she needed to look into. So what the hypnosis brought up was she was about to write her stories of having been abused as a child, and she had waited for the person who was her abuser to die before she started writing her memoirs. But she had been brought up and told by this abuser that you don't air your dirty laundry. This was a big secret. People would turn on her if they knew. And so despite the fact that she knew intellectually that this person was no longer around and it was okay for her to put her story out there, I guess her subconscious hadn't quite gotten the memo. She still had this belief on a subconscious level that she couldn't share this information, that it was somehow going to be unsafe. Now let me backtrack for a moment and talk about people pleasing and perfectionism. Sometimes when we're dealing with these two particular goals or issues, it traces back to having had a particular type of childhood. Now again, I don't want to put anybody into a box. There could be different reasons, but I just want you to be aware of some of the things that I've seen so that if they come up in your practice, you notice them. If a person grows up in an environment where they have a parent who's checked out, a parent who's not particularly attentive to them, or a parent who's critical, often that can lead to people pleasing and perfectionism. On a subconscious level, particularly when we're kids, we want to be accepted by the people around us. In fact, I think when we're kids, there's this urgency to be accepted. These big people are responsible for taking care of us. They're keeping us alive. Our survival is dependent on them. And so if one of the big people or both of the big people seem checked out or don't seem to care about you, you have to find some way to get them to attend to you, to get them to care. And so I think perfectionism and people pleasing is about trying to make the big people happy, trying to figure out what they want you to be or what they need you to be in order for you to be loved and accepted by them. But here's what happens. The adult is critical, so the child says, I need to figure out how to get their attention, how to get their affection, how to get them to love me, so I'll try this, or I'll do that, I'll try to be better, I'll go for perfect, I'll take care of them. But the parent still doesn't pay attention to them. The parent is still critical because it was never about the child, it was about the parent. And so then the child thinks, well, now I have to do even more. I have to strive to be even better. I've got to take even better care of them. I've got to be even more perfect. And so this vicious cycle is set up where we keep striving and striving to be better and be more or take care of the people around us. And it never amounts to getting the affection or attention that we wanted back. So sometimes when we're working on these particular goals, again, we're looking for where was this pattern set up in the first place? What need are you trying to meet, or what need were you trying to meet when that pattern initially began? And of course, dream analysis and dream facilitation can be done in hypnosis. The subconscious is the part of the mind that gives us dreams. Sometimes we wake up and think, what was that all about? Because it makes no sense to the rational mind. But if we took that dream to the part of the mind that created the dream, we could get more insight into it. It's a little bit like reading a book in German and saying, this book doesn't make any sense because you don't speak German. But if you could take it to a German speaker and have them translate it to you, it would make perfect sense. And so sometimes working with a client in hypnosis, they begin to have dreams because their subconscious is trying to communicate something to us, or the person has had particular type of dreams over and over and over in their lives because, again, their subconscious is trying to tell them something, but they've missed the message. They haven't understood it. In hypnosis, we can look for what is that dream really all about. We can also facilitate a dream. One of the ways, again, that the subconscious communicates is through symbols and images through dreams. And so we can get insight and clarity into what's going on for the client by facilitating a dream to help the client understand whatever's going on a subconscious level. In other words, we can get the subconscious to communicate whatever it needs or wants, whatever it's trying to do through a dream that we can then interpret in hypnosis. Now, there's all kinds of other things that we can address in hypnosis that don't fall easily into one of the other categories. For example, we can help people with ADD or ADHD to focus more easily and to deal with whatever those symptoms might entail, even eliminating the symptoms when they're understood. Now, I have a theory about ADD and ADHD that I've actually heard reiterated by people in the trauma field. This isn't true of everybody, of course, but it could be the cause of some people's ADD and ADHD, so again, it's something good to be aware of. My theory is that when a person grows up in an environment with a chaotic person or a person who goes off the rails every now and then, somebody who does unpredictable things, or an environment where there's some kind of abuse or neglect, our fight-flight response gets kicked on. It's an adaptive coping mechanism. It's a way to deal with that person or that environment. But because the subconscious doesn't understand passage of time, once that fight-flight response gets kicked on, it just stays on. Then you take this person who's hyper vigilant because they've got to keep track of this person in their environment who's unpredictable or threatening in some way, and you plunk them down in a classroom with 30 other people that they now have to keep track of. That hypervigilance goes through the roof. And so often when I have a client who has ADD or ADHD, when I ask them about their childhood, that's exactly what I hear. They had somebody or something in their environment that was unpredictable or threatening, and this can be a one-time thing. I mean, if you have a parent who goes off for some reason, you don't know that that's not going to happen again. So now you're on the lookout. Now you're vigilant. Interestingly, I also think that this is where people who are very empathetic get that tendency to be really porous and open to other people's energy and being aware of other people's moods and states. Again, if you have somebody in your environment who goes off the rails, who's hard to understand, who's unpredictable, you learn to read the room. You learn to be kind of one step ahead of people. You learn to pick up on very subtle cues and very subtle information so that you can protect yourself. And then again, because that was a useful coping mechanism for you for that situation, the subconscious just maintains it over time. Now, stuttering and speech impediments can also be resolved in hypnosis. Interestingly, people who stutter lose their stutter when you ask them to speak in hypnosis. Now, in my experience, stuttering can often relate back to an experience where the person was afraid and unable to properly communicate because of their fear. And when you work on whatever that fearful event was, the stuttering stops altogether. And there's also all kinds of sleep-related challenges that we can work on with a person in hypnosis. We can help an insomniac to be able to sleep without using sleep meds or sleep aids. And we can help a person with restless legs feel more settled at night and get rid of nightmares and other sleep-related issues such as sleepwalking, sleep talking, and sleep eating. I had a client once who came to me because he would fight in his sleep without being at all aware of what was going on, and this was making it very difficult to sleep with his wife, to say the least. Now, when it comes to working with children, we can work on any of the things that apply to working on adults, assuming that they also apply to working on children. But there's also some things with kids that we might work on specifically. For example, if a child wets their bed or soils the bed, we can work with them on that, whether it's looking for any positive association with bedwetting. Maybe this kid gets extra attention because they wet the bed, or any reason underneath the bedwetting. I had a child who started wetting his bed when their parents broke up, and it was his way of just expressing his distress with the breakdown of their relationship. And we can also help a person to sleep a little bit more lightly so that they're more aware of the signals from their body and can get up in time. I've also worked with children on things like thumb sucking and separation anxiety and dealing with bullies. Often when you're working with children, you're really working on what's going on in their home. Children are sometimes just responding to something taking place in their homes. And I'm sure that there are even more things that we could work on with a person in hypnosis, but these are some examples from my own practice. See why I think we could go door to door and convince people that they need hypnosis? This is really one of the things that I love about hypnosis. You could find a niche, an area that you particularly like working on, something that you love to talk about all day long. You could become a specialist in that area and have a whole practice built around something that you're excited about, that you really enjoy talking about, and that you're fascinated by. You could be doing that thing you're fascinated by all day long. Hi, I'm Linda Campbell from the Horizon Center School of Hypnotherapy, and it's my voice that you've been listening to so far. I hope that you've enjoyed the video and got a lot out of it. Now, if you are interested in training, reach out. I would love to have a conversation with you, but I'll give you a little bit of information about the two programs that I'm currently offering. I do have a self-paced program. Now with this program, you go through the material on your own. There's 29 units of curriculum. They're jam-packed with videos, audios, exercises to do, and you move through the material at your own pace. You submit to me videos and assignments so that I can give you feedback and assess you so that I can make sure that you know what you're doing. The tuition is $38.24, and there are a couple different options as far as payment plans. You can pay over 12 months at $478 a month, or over 18 months, $320. Now with the self-paced program, if you want some additional support because you are working through the material all on your own, I do offer you a few options. One option is that you can sit in on monthly supervision meetings. So I hold hour-and-a-half long supervision meetings for all of my students and graduates, and this is an opportunity to get together on Zoom, network with other hypnotherapists, and get questions answered. If you're struggling with a client and you need some feedback or some ideas as to where to go next, or maybe you want help getting clients, all of these are things that you can bring to a supervision meeting. And the supervision meeting counts when you're in an association towards your required supervision hours. You can also watch recorded classes. So the next class I'm going to talk about is the interactive online class. When I do that class, I record all of the classes so that if one of my self-paced students would like to view one of the classes, you can do so at an additional cost. You could also sit in on one of those interactive online classes. I've got the whole itinerary worked out at the beginning of the class, so I know on what weekends or during which months we're going to be covering which material. And so if there's a particular topic or technique that you'd like to see me teach or you'd like to see the demonstration of, you're welcome for an additional cost to sit on the class. You can also work with me privately one-on-one. I'm always happy to get online with you and give you some additional tutoring. Now the interactive online class has the same 29 units of material. The content is the same, but you're expected to cover the content on your own, and then we meet one weekend a month in class via Zoom. The class time is used for practices, demonstrations, exercises, lectures. We go into breakout rooms where you hypnotize a partner and they hypnotize you. The tuition for this program is a little bit more because there is the interactive portion. It's $48.24. You can pay it over 12 months, which brings it down to $402 a month, or you can pay it over 18 months, which brings it to $286. Now, if you're interested, but you're not quite sure yet, I'm happy to let you try out the first unit of the training for free. Go to my website, horizoncenterhypnotherapy.com, and you'll see an opt-in sign-up form. In exchange for giving me your email address so I can keep in touch and let you know about classes and that sort of thing coming up, you get to get into the first unit of curriculum so that you can check it out and see what you think. Now, if you want to know a little bit about me, I've been a full-time hypnotherapist since 1999, and I've taught hypnotherapy since 2004. My program has been given an award by the International Medical and Dental Hypnotherapy Association, that's a mouthful, for excellence in hypnotherapy training. And I do have a bachelor in education. So alongside being a hypnotherapist, I was a teacher prior, so I know how to teach. I know how to create lesson plans. I know how to create exercises to help you really, take in the techniques and concepts that I'm teaching you, and how to give you information in a way where it makes sense, where it's practical and usable. And I'm also really committed to helping all of my students be as successful as they can possibly be. I just think if you've put a year of your life and pretty much $5,000 into taking training, you want it to be successful. So I'm there for you after the course as well. I tell my students I don't disappear. I'm not a hologram. If you ever want to get online, hop on Zoom, let's have a coffee date, talk about clients, talk about whatever your struggles are with your practice. I'm willing to be there for you. I also do things like offer ongoing mentoring, workshops on different topics that students want more information in, as well as business development courses. So if you're interested in training or you want to talk more, get in touch. You can find me at horizoncenterhypnotherapy.com, info@horizoncenterhypnotherapy.com to email. Take care. Have a lovely day.